Hello, welcome back. Today we're continuing on with the development of the string grid object that we started way back in part 23. If you're new to this video presentation and you're interested in everything we've done with the string grid, you should really go back and start viewing with part 23. Okay, today we are developing a graphical user interface for Linux, Mac OS, and Microsoft Windows, and we're using Lazarus and free Pascal. Today we're going to add functionality to the string grid object. We're going to have it disallow moving beyond a required field. That's the functionality we're going to add. And to be very honest with you, I tried recording this part 28 video and doing it flying by the seat of my pants, and it was a miserable failure. The way I was doing it was fraught with all kinds of problems, and it was a mess. So I'm re-recording part 28 today, and what I did was I sat down and worked on the code off camera and took a different direction with it, and it worked out much better. So just being honest with you. So I will be working off of a printout of the source code that the changes that I made, and so things should go much smoother. That other video got to be over 90 minutes long, way too long. So we're starting at about 11:30. Hopefully we'll have this wrapped up before 12:30, and let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to bring up our Lazarus integrated development environment. Oh, I've got tiling on. Nah, I don't want that. Let's shut that off. There we go. That kind of hosed things up, didn't it? Huh? Okay, this is the Lazarus development environment, integrated development environment, and we are currently looking at Unit 1. It says it's been changed. It has not. So let's look at our window. Okay, this is the window we've been designing. Here's our string grid object, and the idea of today is that, for example, if you're in this field and you want to move to down here, and then there's another field that is required, it won't let you do that. It will force you to the next field. Let's actually run what we currently have. Okay, this is the window running. And there's a cursor flashing here. It may be difficult to see. If I decide to move to this field, I can do that right now. I can move down here. I can move over here. I can move back up here. In other words, we want these to be required fields. And when you move forward, it won't let you past a field that's really required. Well, it would be nice to have that either the tab button or when you click the mouse button on the cell, that it catches the fact that you've missed a required cell. And that's the feature I want to add today. So how do we do that? All right. Oh, the other thing I want to mention is I'm going to treat the first cell as cell number 1. So this will be cell 2, cell 3, cell 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay? It will number the cells will get numbered, and that's how we're going to track how we're moving around on this grid. And I just thought I'd mention that now before we get started with the code. All right. So here I've highlighted, I clicked on the string grid, and you can see that these bars to stretch and shape it are now visible. And also, if you look over here in the object inspector, it has highlighted the string grid object. And down here we are seeing information, properties and events that have been set up for the string grid, okay? So let's go to events, and we're going to use an event that says on after selection, which is one of the very first events showing up here in my events window. And if I click on this, I will get an informational window appear, which explains how this event works. So it says on after selection is a T on a select event property that is the event handler signaled when the selection for the control has been moved. An application can implement and assign an object procedure using the event signature to perform any action needed for the notification. The arguments passed to the event handler include the column and row numbers prior to moving the selection. So what that says is it's going to give me, if I'm currently in the first name column and row, and I click on the birth date column and row, it's going to pass back to me the row that I moved from, okay, which will be what I call cell 1, and then you can interrogate the row and column properties of the control to find where I moved to. All right. Okay, so let's hook up this event. I can create this. I can create the procedure by simply double clicking on this empty edit box. So let's put focus back onto the source code, and then I'm going to double click in this edit box. Okay, you see it added up it added in a new procedure name, which is sgrid after selection. And then if you look in the source code, it has now added the procedure, and it's T-form string grid after selection, right, like that. We've got our after selection procedure set up. We're going to treat the cells as being numbered 1 through 12 or 15 or 18 instead of addressing them as column and row numbers. Now in Lazarus, they treat it as column and row. You'll notice here that the after selection procedure that it created, it returns, when it triggers, it gives us the previous column and the previous row. This is what we're going to use to determine if we're skipping past a required field. And in this case, all of the fields are required fields, okay? The first name, the last name, and the birth date are required. And if you try skipping forward to another cell that bypasses a required field, it will force your cursor back to the field that needs to be filled in. So we're going to write we need to take columns and rows and convert them to cell numbers. It's one of the first things we really need to do, because we want to deal with these as numbered cells. So we're going to need to write a function that does that. And I'm going to put these functions in the private area of this form, okay? So this is tform class, and in it you see all of the all of the buttons and labels and panels, the string grid object that are currently defined within that window. So in other words, this object, the button, these labels, these panels, they're all defined in that list that we were looking at. So these are all the objects that we've laid on the form. And these are currently the list of procedures that were created for the form. And the one that we just added is right here. It's this line right here, okay? I guess I could highlight it this way. That's what we just added when we clicked on this edit bar edit box over here. All right. So I'm going to add some functions. And the first function I'm going to add is going to be the one that computes cell numbers. So I have to define it in here. This is like a function prototype, and all it's going to do is give the name, and the name of this will be cell number. So we put in cell number, right? Now, what do we need to compute a cell number? Well, we're going to have the row and the column that the cell is in, and how many columns are on the current string grid. So we'll call it I row, I column, I columns, I calls, that's the number of columns that are in a row. And I think, yes, and these are, of course, these are all integers. So this list, we put a colon here, and then we tell it what all of those identifiers are. They're all integers, okay? And that's the end of that function. Now we need to go the other way. So we need to be able to, we need to have a function that takes a cell number and comes back with what row it's in. So we will call that, let's do the column first. Okay, well, so we need the same thing. We need to have the column number. I'm going to call this, I'm going to call that number. That's kind of long to be typing number in every time. Let's call it cell number, like that. That's shorter, more abbreviated. So to get our column number, we pass it the current cell number, and we have to have the number of columns. That's it, in per row. So that's I calls again, and these are integers, right? And now let's do the row, column and then row. I'm trying to get these in alphabetical order is what I'm doing here. So we got row, NBR, Again, we pass it the cell. And we have the number of columns again. And that's integers. All right. I forgot to tell it what it's passing back. And you do that by putting a colon at the end of the closing parenthesis in the list of arguments, and then you tell it what it's returning, right? Better do that. These are all returning an integer value. So, all right. Now we're going to need these in our code. So let's just take this list we just created. Now remember, these functions are a part of tform1. So when we declare them, we have to declare them as tform1 functions. You'll see how that works. All right, so I've just highlighted that. I'm going to hit Control Insert. I just did that. And now I'm going to copy those down into our code here. And I'm going to put these early in the code. Here, I'm going to put those because we wrote a special display key function procedure in here. So I'm going to put them right here after that. So I'm going to do a shift insert, and now I'm going to put a little label, a little comment in front of each of these. This is going to say returns. I better say what the function is. Repeat it right here. I'll just say cell number of the cell at the given row and column numbers. And I'm going to label each of these in the same fashion, explaining what they do. Column, number, returns the. I could say returns the cell number, and that would be, isn't that a little bit better? The cell number. There, that fits better, doesn't it? Okay, this returns the column number. If I spelled properly, it would be in better shape. For the given cell number. There we go. And if I use a pound sign instead of the word number, that shortens it up even more, doesn't it? There we go. Okay, and then we're going to come down here. And now we're going to say row number. And I'm just going to take this and modify it. Grab it. Shift insert. just going to say row number here. Okay, returns the row number for the given cell number. All right, now we can start fleshing these out. Now I cheated, and in advance I figured out all of these, all this code. So it looks like I'm doing this so smoothly, but trust me, I had to sit there with a pencil and paper and figure out how to do this. So for cell number, now the way these work, this actually defines cell number becomes an integer, and you can use it as what receives the value that you're computing. So I'm doing it, that's how that works. So cell number is equal to I row minus 1 times I columns plus I column. Okay, so it takes the row. The row always rows are numbered 1, 2, 3, etc. It subtracts 1 from it and multiplies that by the number of columns in a row. So if you're in row 1, it'll subtract 1 from that, multiply it by the number of columns, which will be 0, and then it will add the column number you passed to it. So let's assume our focus is on row 2, the first column of row 2. So it would subtract 1 from 2, which would give you 1, multiply it by the number of columns in a row, which would give you 3, and it would add 1 to that. So that would give you cell number 4. See how that works? And it's a one-line function. It's pretty straightforward. Now, these kind of reverse what that does. Okay, so here we have begin, and I'm going to say column number is equal to the cell number minus the cell number minus 1 divided by I columns times times I columns. All right, and I put a space here. All right, and that computes column number, and you can work through that with a pencil. So if you're on cell number 1, if you're on cell 1, this entire thing gets converted to 0. And you subtract 0 from cell 1 and you get 1. Well, what if you're on cell number 4? So now you have 4, and you're going to subtract this computed value from it. That is, did I leave it? Yes, I think. Yes, okay. So subtract 1 from cell 4, that gives you a 3. It divides it by 3, that gives you a 1. Takes it times 3, that gives you 3. Subtracts 3 from 4 and gives you 1. So it says you're in column 1. That's right. Let's move on. We're going to do the next one now. begin. Here we're computing column. No, here we're computing row number. And it is equal to I cell minus 1 divided by I columns plus 1. All right. So if you're in cell 1, this becomes 0. And that is 0, and you have 1. So you are in row number 1. Now let's say you're in cell number 4. Well, cell 4 minus 1 becomes 3. Divided by 3 is 1. Plus 1 equals row 2. Cell 4 is located in row 2. So that's how that works. Okay, so now we have the functions we need to convert back and forth between cell numbers and row numbers. So the next step is to start fleshing out our on after selection event, which we had added down here. Here it is, right here. All right, now a quick way to comment what this is going to do, or what triggers this, is to go over here and you can highlight the text in this box like this, right? So I'm just holding the left mouse key down and then dragging the cursor down across this text. And now if I hit Control Insert, I've just copied that onto the clipboard. Now I come over here and I'll put in an opening and closing curly brace. That encloses a comment. Okay, now I position in between those, and I'm going to do a Shift Insert, and we just took all that text from the clipboard and copied it into our source code. Now, the next step is to wrap this better, because it's going right out past the right hand margin there. So I'm going to rename this, because it's really called string grid, S grid after selection. And then the next line will start describing it. And I'll just space it over here and delete and delete and come over here. Yeah, give myself a little room. All right, come down here. Tab over a little bit, and then Control right arrow moves a word at a time, so that's a little faster. And I I think this is a quick way to comment something, to comment some code. And there we go. Okay, so now we have this commented. If you like to pretty it up a little bit here, right? Alrighty. All right. Yeah, pretty it up a little bit. Control insert. Let me come back up. Shift insert. Home tab. There we go. All right. Now we're ready to start writing some code. Okay, so the idea behind this is that when we move forward to a cell, that's when we want to do something. Moving backward, in other words, doing a shift tab to move backward, or if we click a cell in a prior row or column, we don't do anything. We only want to do stuff when we're moving forward through the cells. So let's we're going to have some variables for this. And we're going to have we're going to use a for loop to move through the cells. So we're going to need a cell number, and I'm just going to call that I cell. And then we're going to have, when this event triggers, it's going to give us the column that we left, column and row. And we're going to convert that to the beginning cell, right? So I'm going to call that I cell B for begin. And then the string grid will give us the column, the row and column that we moved to. So that's I cell end. We're going to call that, we're going to compute that into a cell number, and we're going to call that I cell end, which we'll just use an E to keep it short. These are integers. Okay. And we could put a little comment above this line. Wouldn't be a bad idea. We could say I cell is the iterator in a for loop. And we can say I cell B is the beginning cell number, and I cell E it is the ending cell number. Okay, that explains that. Now we've got so now we're going to have variables that when we take the cell and convert it back into columns and rows. So we're going to need an I column, an I row, integer. Okay, these are integers. And we're just going to say I column and I row are the positions of a cell number. Okay, that gets us started. So when this procedure fires, it's going to give us the two integers, a column and a row, and we're going to need to convert these to cell numbers. All right, so that's those two integers, a column and a row, are the cell that we left when we moved. So we'll use our functions we created to compute those. So cell, so what we want to do here is we're going to say compute the cell numbers of the beginning cell and ending cell. So we had I cell begin is equal to, and here's where we're going to use our functions for the first time. Cell number, and now you'll notice Lazarus is showing us the prototype that we put in up above to give us a hint as to what arguments, I row, column, and cols, are to be passed to this function. Okay, and then it tells us it returns an integer. Okay, so that's good stuff. So the beginning is a column and a row. So we're going to put in a row, comma, and now we're going to put in a column, comma. Now, where do we get the number of rows? Well, string grid tells us how many columns there are. So all we got to do is put in sgrid dot, and we'll get a little help thing. And I start typing in column, and you'll notice right here is column count. That's exactly what we want. So we just hit enter for that. And that is that. Now it gives us a count that's one greater than the actual number of columns, because it includes that fixed column in the far left-hand side, which we don't use. So so we need to subtract 1 from that number, okay, to give us the actual number of columns available to us, because that first column is a fixed column, okay? That makes sense? We're going to compute the ending cell now. And that's going to be cell number. And now where do we get the current row that comes back from string grid gives us these numbers. So this is an S grid dot. Now it's expecting row, so I'm going to start typing R, and it's right here. That is the integer we want. Now we want the column. Again, that's given to us by sgrid. And it's CO, and it's right here, column. Okay? And then we just use this number that we had up above. That's the rest of it. So I will just Shift End, Control Insert, and I'll move down, hit End, and hit Shift Insert. And that completes that. So now we have cell numbers. Now we have to determine, are we moving forward, right? So if the movement is to a higher cell number, then we're going to do our, we're going to check for any bypassed required fields. If we're moving backwards, we don't care. So this is an if. So I'll say if the ending cell is greater than the beginning cell, then we're going to do something. All right. And we're going to say, we're going to loop through cells until we find an empty one. So we go, here's where we use that cell number. Here's where we use this integer, is in this for loop. So we say for I cell, and we have to give it its starting integer, which will be I cell begin. And we have to tell it the cell that we're moving to, I cell end. And we say now we're going to do this. And since it's going to be a block of statements, we're going to do a do begin, right? And let's just for grins label this end statement. And we're just going to label it for I cell. Right? For I cell loop. There we go. Now we know what that is. Here we go. So now we're going to compute. Now we have to compute the columns, because remember, we're moving through cell numbers, but to address them in the string grid, we need to know the columns and rows. So that's the next thing we need to do. We need to take this cell number, I cell, that we're currently looking at, and we need to convert that back to a row and column so that we can address it and see if that cell in the grid is empty or not. Convert cell number to its row and column. So here we go. So we're going to say I column, right? Or I row rather, I row is equal to row number, this is our function, I cell, and then we need the columns per row. S grid dot and that's that one. And now we got to get the column, and that's going to be column number I cell, and then that's the same number that we have up above. So we will just copy that and control insert, end, shift insert. And now the next step is, if the cell is empty, focus on it. So that's S grid and its cells, right? And it goes column and row. So I've got to put in the I column and the row. And we're checking to see if that is an empty cell. So if it's equal to an empty cell, that's just nothing. Now, we only want to do that if we've actually moved to a different row and column. If we're in the same, for some reason we're in the same cell, then we don't want to change the location. You know what I'm saying? So if it's an empty one and yeah, I don't like the way this is doing this. Okay. All right. So if it's not, and this is the column, and it's not equal to I column, or it's not that would be row. All right. Okay, this is where we would then so we've determined at this point that the cell we're looking at is empty, and that it is not equal to the current column and row. So it did actually, we actually did move somewhere. So at this point we compute, we actually move to that row and column. This is row, and we're moving to setting it equal to I row. And this is the grid column, and we're moving to the computed column. Now we're in a for loop, and we're done because we've determined that we need to move, and we've done the move. We don't want to loop any further through. We don't want to look at any more cells. We've already found an empty cell that's required, so we want to break this loop. So we put in a break statement, and that will send us out to the end of this loop. Like that. I prefer to line up the ends with the ifs. So it will break out of this loop. Now, here's where automatic validation comes into play. So let's, at the beginning of all this, let's say what this block did. When moving forward in the string grid, do not bypass required cell entries. That's what this does. I'm going to kind of highlight that. Now the next thing is, okay, we are at this. Yes, that is the end. This is the end of the procedure. And this is the end of this if statement up above. So let's mark the end. And we will say if I cell is greater than, oh, I cell B, E is greater than I cell B. Okay, that tells us that that's the end of that. Now this is where column data verification comes in. Because now we know the cell that we left, right? A column, A row. So what we can do now is we can automatically check the birth date. If we've left the birth date field, which is a required field, now we can check its contents to validate it. So let's just say in general, no, this is not column. This is cell data verification, right? All right. So we're going to say if we're exiting the birth date column, we're going to do something here. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Okay. Now we're going to say if the column we're leaving, which is A column, equals B date. Now where did B date come from? We're at line 235. Where did B date come from? Let's go look all the way back here. B date is equal to 3. It's a macro we defined very early in the code that eliminates the need for magic numbers. You don't want to use magic numbers. If I just put 3 there, a programmer is going to look at that and go, what in the world is 3? Why is he looking at 3, you know? Now he looks at it and he goes, oh, if the column is the birth date column, that's what he's looking at. All right. So now we've got then begin. And we say if the birth date is not valid, so we will say, oh, well, first of all, we have to compute it. So we will say, oh, we're going to need an integer. We're going to need an integer. Let's say it's I valid BD. Okay. All right. And now we're going to use that. We're going to use the birth date function that we had our artificial intelligence generate for us. pass it the contents of that cell. So we're going to give it S grid. And here's cells. And we have to give it the A column and the A row. So that'll pass back the string that's in the cell at that column and row. And now we can say if I valid BD is less than 0, then we have a problem, right? Then begin. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to put a message in panel status. Now, panel status, let's look at our thing. Right here, this is panel status, which gives us messages about things that are happening. So that's the thing we're addressing now. So panel status, the text displayed in it is called, its property is called caption. There it is. And we're going to set that equal to the other function that we wrote. That's the birth date message. So we're going to have birth date message. And the message is going to be whatever I valid BD is, birth date. All right. Well, that's if there's an error. Now, what if there's not an error? What do we do? What do we do with, let's say, else? This is going to be one statement, so we don't need a begin, because there's just one statement. Oh, okay, let's do that. So we'll say panel status should tell captions first. You notice it moves that up in the list, so it's very handy. And we're going to format, and our format statement is days prior to today. Equals. And then it's a decimal integer number. Oops, D. That's our format statement. And we're passing it the number that came back from. So when valid birth date is not an error, it returns a number between 0 and some large number, which is the number of days since that person's birth date, between the current system date and the person's birth date. And formerly, we had to press that test birth date button in order to do this. It will now happen all automatically. And that's called the I valid BD. All right. And that's the end of the format statement, and it just went over our margin. So I got to wrap this. All right. what's the end of this if? So if you had other cell data verifications, you'd add them into this list. You'd test to see what column you had left and then do the verification, right? Oh, one other thing we got to do. Well, we told it what was wrong, but now we got to go. Now we got to go back. We got to go back to the row and column where the error occurred to get it fixed. So that's sgrid dot row is equal to a row, right? That's the column that we left when, and that we were testing the cell in. And now we got to go back to the column that it's in. Oops. You know what? Okay, let's just, we're going to do column. All right. And that's going to be a column. Right? Oh, well, it could be either a column, but you know, since we know it's the birth date column, let's just put B date in. That's kind of hard coding it. Right? I could do it either way. I could put a column and a row. I used a row. I guess I could do a column. That probably doesn't make any difference. I'm just going to hard code it B date because that's what we tested was the birth date column, right? Right here we said, oh, the a column is equal to birth date. Okay. And we don't need any exits or anything like that because this is the end. Now there's not a lot of code in here, but I'm just going to, for grins, comment this end. It's the if a column equals B date. All right. And actually you don't need parentheses because this is the only test being done. It's not like you're taking that test and then logically combining it with another test or something. There's only one test. You really don't need to put parentheses around that. I come from a C background, and you have to parenthesize it to everything. So that's why I do it. It's just a force of habit. All right, so now that takes care of all the logic. Let's see, test birth date click is the next thing. Okay. I did modify this I added all this code in here. And if the row is greater than 0 and the count, the row count is greater than row, then begin. Panel status caption is empty. We clear it and we set the result to this, and if the result is greater than or equal to 0, we output that message and exit. Otherwise, we output the error message. And at the end, no matter what we've done, well, that exit. I don't think we want to exit. Do we? No. I don't think we want to exit. That's a mistake. It's a mistake. So we don't need this begin because we're only going to have one statement. This does not need to end with a semicolon because it's not the end of the statement. And we can get rid of this and this. Okay, that cleans that up. Let's save all of our changes. I think that's everything we need to do to make this work right. Let's we saved it. Now let's try compiling and running. Okay. Columns. It says syntax error. I expected a semicolon. I expected a semicolon. Okay, let's see what I messed up there. That's in our function column number. Column number. Cell minus contents. Cell minus 1 divided by I columns. Syntax error. Oh, I left out a opening parenthesis here. It's supposed to be a block within a block. That fixes that. Okay, let's save that and let's try running again. Okay. Identifier not found. Oh, I forgot to include the valid birth date integer. That's way up here at the top, right? Key press event. Form show event. Here we go. Yeah. And I'll add it here. I valid birth date. Integer. And this is the result of the valid birth date function. Okay. There we go. That takes care of that bug, or error. Not a bug, it's an error. All right. It says forward declaration not solved. Okay, what did I do there? Oh, I forgot to tell it it's a member of T form. You have to put tform1 dot in front of the procedure because it's defined as a private function within tform. So I've got to add tform1 dot. And I did that for all of those. I did that for all of these. So they all got to have this added. So I'll do a control insert of that. And I'll just come down here and I shift insert and shift insert. That fixes that error. Save it. It put caption in there. Sometimes code completion's not your friend, huh? There we go. Did it do that on the other ones? No, it just did that one for some reason. I must have hit an enter. After I typed the dot in, I hit an enter and it filled that caption in. I don't know why it did that. Okay. Yay. Okay. Let's see if this works. So first name is a required, they're all required fields. You can't skip a required field. So I'm going to press the tab key and move to last name. I just pressed it. You can see the key up event triggered. I'm still in the first name field. Didn't let me out, did it? Okay, let's put in John and hit tab. Okay, it let me go to last name. If I hit tab again, where did it go? Oh, we're stuck in some kind of loop. And it's bringing up some control here. I don't know why it's doing that. And then I'm back in birth date for some reason. So that's got to be something happening in that code after selection. That's got to be something happening in after selection. Well, I guess the thing to do here is to trap and see where things went wrong.
A few moments later.
I'm back. Okay, a little trapping through the execution of this SGrid after selection procedure uncovered a loop, a never-ending loop cycle. SGrid after selection gets triggered not only when you physically move to a new cell with a mouse or by hitting a tab or by pressing a cursor movement key to move to a next cell. It also gets triggered when your code moves to a new cell. So let's look at the code. When I hit tab out of, well, let's look at the thing. When I hit tab to this, when I tab from this entry to this one, we were fine. I left this one blank, and I hit the tab key to move to the birth date field. When I did that, the code caught that the next that I had moved into the birth date field. So it set the previous column to column 3. When my code then moved back to last name, it triggered the cycle again. And when it did that, here is what happened. Okay, so it set it back. And after it did that, it fell through to here. And this thing said, oh, the previous column was birth date. I'm going to have to validate it. Well, it was an empty cell. The birth date was still empty. So it came up with an iValid BD that was negative. That set the row and column to the birth date field, moving it back to birth date. As soon as it did that, it triggered this part of the procedure to happen again, right? It triggered this again. And it said, oh, he's trying to move to a new cell. But the previous cell hasn't been filled in yet. So it told it moved back one column. As soon as it did that, it triggered the event again. And it got caught in this vicious cycle. It got caught in this vicious cycle. Because then birth date would say, oh, he exited birth date and therefore I have to check the birth date. The birth date's invalid. It sets it to the birth date field, and it just kept flip-flopping back and forth, hung in a loop. So what I did was I made some changes here. First of all, if your previous column is a birth date, and now if you are moving forward, actually it says the previous column is birth date, and you're actually moving beyond that now. That's when you validate. So that stopped this loop from happening. I also noticed that it wasn't clearing the caption. When it would leave days prior to today and a number in the status panel, and not clear it when you started entering the next person. So what I've done is what I'm going to do right here, I'm going to go ahead and put this code back. I'm going to leave this change in here that prevents that loop from happening. And I'm going to put this back to the way it was, okay? And I'm going to comment these two lines out so you can see that happening. All right. I tried hitting exit here, but you know, actually, as soon as sgrid column gets set, it triggers the event. So this break actually never happens. And the only thing that keeps this from looping forever is this move forward statement. That stops this from just running forever. If this isn't here, it's an infinite loop. It has to actually check to see if you're moving forward a cell. Okay? Let's save that and let's run it. And you'll see now that it works properly. Okay. What I did before was I typed in John, I hit tab, and then I hit tab again. Now what happens is, when it tabbed a birth date and the code caught that last name hadn't been entered, and it moved back to last name, that was a movement backwards from birth date, not forwards from birth date. So now it doesn't execute the birth date validation code. It just moves back. And that prevents that crazy loop from happening. So now I enter John Adams, tab. And now if I hit Shift Tab and go back to Adams, it's not checking the birth date. Because even though I'm exiting birth date, and that's the previous column, I'm not moving forward. So now I tab to birth date. And now let's do some tests. 13/1/2000. Tab. Invalid month. Now I'll correct the month. Make that 12. And now I'll put in a bad day. Tab. Invalid day. Now I will force the bad month and day. Tab. Invalid month and day. Now I will give it a valid month, day, and I'll give it a bad year. 1899. Tab. Year prior to 1900. Doesn't like that. Now I'll give it a good year. And had no problem with it. Now it says days prior to today. But now I'm going to enter another name. Sally Smith. Now it's still showing days prior to today for Sally Smith, which kind of misleading. So I'll give her a date. We'll give her a good date. Let's give her a bad date. 2/29. And we got to give it a leap year. 2004. Tab. Oh, that is a leap year. I want a non-leap year. What am I doing? (2003). That's not a leap year. Tab. Invalid day. So it caught the problem with February 28th. Tab. There we go. Now, as soon as I start entering the new guy, so now we're on to Don, and I hit, as soon as I tab, you notice it's still keeping those days prior to today in there. So we want to fix that. I think that's not good. And that's where changing that, making these changes came into play. Okay. Now that will fix that. So if we're not validating the birth date and outputting the caption, we clear it, right? All right. And because we just break, or we let this fall through. There's no exits. Cell data verification stuff will always execute as soon as you move to the next cell. Okay, we saved that. Let's now run it. And we'll do the John Adams birth date. Okay, now I'll enter Sally. And as soon as I tab, that gets cleared. Right? Okay. And now we're to Henry. And there we go. It clears it again. Shift back tabbing through fields. No problems. No verifications are going to get executed until we start tabbing forward. Test birth date. That still works, I think. Let's close this and take a look at the test birth date button. Okay. Now this code's changed. What I used to do, I used to just generate the birth date, test the birth date for row 1, column 3. So what I do now is, if the row is in the range that it should be, I clear the caption, I run the valid birth date thing for the birth date column and the current string grid row. And then I output the appropriate panel status caption depending on what's returned. So if the result is greater than or equal to 0, I put out days prior to today equal and then the number of days. Otherwise, if it's negative, I set the panel status caption to the birth date message, which indicates the error condition. And then I reset focus on the grid. Okay, because it leaves focus on caption for some reason. It takes focus off of the grid. You have to put it back there. And that's those changes there. And that's in button test, test birth date click. So let's try it now. We'll run it again. All right. So I'll just put anything in here. JS 1900. And this is going to be TP 12/25/2004. Now, I can position to I can be in any row, click this, and it calculates for the row you're in. So if I go to this row, test birth date, it gives me the calculation for that one. If I go to this one, invalid date. Okay. So that's all working. We got this done. I think that's it for today. If you found this demonstration of the string grid to be of use, or you just enjoyed watching me muddle my way through writing code, give me a like. And if you want to see more demonstrations of free Pascal and the use of Lazarus, subscribe. And please, if you have comments, feel free to make comments. Negative or positive, I don't care. Anyway, we're done with string grid for today. I don't know where we're going with it next. Maybe we'll move on to a different form control. We'll see. But until I see you next time, hey, have a great day.